Prying Eyes by Mack D. Chapter 3 Not So Forgotten Memories. Joy, happiness. A smiling child riding down the block in front of a light blue house with white trim around the windows. The helmet worn by the kid was partially lopped to one side. It could have been a bit tighter, yet the child didn't seem to mind. Smile widened, showing baby teeth that still remained in weight. Unlike teeth, however, some things don't have a replacement to follow. A man cheering the child quickly caught up hopefully, saying, "You're doing it, kiddo. That's a new distant record, huh? I knew you could do it." The positive support has the child almost in tears, not of sadness, but of pride, and from the support of the man. That man was the child's father. Supportive and charismatic was as his composure had held. The child, looking over her left shoulder, smiled to the father. While doing so, also had used that same shoulder borne to the child to wipe the remaining tears away. Proud and feeling accomplished, the child pedaled as fast as those little legs would go. More cheers came from the father. "Woohoo, kiddo! You're a natural!" Distance started to grow from the father to the child, slowly at first, but the distance suddenly grew larger. The chain on the father's bike had stopped in its place. His pants had gotten loose from its tucked-away position within his knee-high sock. It had seamlessly caught in the chain of the bicycle. Not noticing that the father had been left behind, the child continued on. Turning left would only loop around in a small cul-de-sac, bringing the child back around. Knowing this, along with the opposite turn being their usual route of practice, all that remained was to turn right. Doing a speedy right turn, proud and smiling almost bigger than before, the child rode up the curb and then popped left to drop off it gently. "I did a trick!" yelled the child. Using the brake attached to the right handle, the child stops. As the kid stops, skidding and swooping as they do, notices Dad wasn't there. "I must have outbiked the old man," the kid thought to themselves. Placing the stationary foot back on the correct pedal, the child leans forward into motion. The kid pedaled back, not having to go far to find their father. He was partially dragging his bike down the sidewalk while still attached to it. He notices his child as he stops to throw up his hands, laughing as he does. He grabs his bike, bending to inspect it, aiming to remove his own pants leg from the locked bike chain, when a loud, humming growl bellows from behind him. It grows intense in sound in only the time of a fraction of a second. An old, black van comes from behind the father. It completely covers over him, dragging him within feet from his own child. That's when the father detached from his bicycle. During that time, the man had rolled a total of 7.5 times, just enough to put the man in the position to gaze at his own child. The man's eyes were directly on that of the kid as the light was already gone. This was apparent to the child, but obvious, traumatic doubt and age kept the child from believing it so suddenly. In that moment, the kid hopped off their bike and ran to the man, the child's father. The child dropped downwards, face first, burying their face into the chest of the man. With a straight upward look toward the sky, the child screamed, "Why?" A fist held up as if to damn God for letting this happen. Yet it wasn't God. It was that driver. The driver of that old black van. The one that the child didn't even notice had drove off into the distance. The one that you didn't even notice had drove off into the distance. The one you let get away with the so-called accident. The one you let kill your father. right in front of you, clean and easy without a hitch or a roll. Unlike Dad, he rolled a few times when he died. You've seen it happen. You awaken, shaking from the brisk cold air formed from the midwestern fall winds. You try to recap the surreal, vivid dream you had just had. It's one you've had before, many times actually. That black van. You never did see it after that day. You would remember seeing that van of all vehicles that existed. You couldn't even remember the car Mom and Dad had at the time of the accident, but you would remember that one. How could you ever forget? The antenna seemed oversized in nature. That and the license plate was bordered black, peeling with its age. LMJ5 something, something, something. You almost had the entire plate that day. Fat help that did, though, being as there were 16 other models exactly the same. Freakish part is the two that had similar enough plates to match were crushed in the town scrapyard that same day. They found Dad's blood on the outside of the van, but that was it. The vans were both registered, each one to a man that was long since deceased and a man who was in a nursing home with dementia. Both had obvious alibis at the time, and the man with dementia had no family or visitors who had knowledgeable access. You walked your bike as you looked up at the night sky. The wind picks up gently but fiercely, leaving chills down your spine. You jump a bit in place as you stop to listen. Did someone just call your name a second ago? It was faint, but there it was. It seemed the only way you could even hear it was because the sound was being carried by the force of the wind. You look in the direction of the sound stating your name. You stand next to the outer fence of a graveyard. The only family members you knew of in that graveyard was your grandfather and grandmother. You are sure enough they wouldn't be calling out to you. You never did believe in ghosts. You may be on medication, but you were sure someone was having fun with you. The voice repeated once more again. It was a whispery voice, strained sounding and harshened. You wheel your bike along the side yourself as you continue towards the entrance. Couldn't hurt to take a look, seeing as the front gate was kind of in its way as you had to go anyways. You push to open the gate, but a thick, heavy chain stops you from entering. The lock on the chain was almost an equal size to your fist. You yourself could fit easily, however, seeing as the gate was impacted in upon itself, only held together by the chain that guards it. You decide to leave your bike leaned against the rusted fence attached to the gate. It's easy enough to squeeze through the opening in the gate, at least after you made your way through the overgrowth that formed from the gate's lack of use. You walk along the old broken road as you thought to yourself how no one really ever visits this part of the cemetery. There was 3 openings into it, and the other 2 attached to each other at one point or another. Not this one, though. It was as if it was its own graveyard. The whispers grew to quick shouts, short in duration, so sudden that you could only get a general location of where they were coming from. Also, again, it didn't help that the wind had been carrying the voice the whole time. You were sure the voice had been coming in the direction from behind a set of hedges, thick in nature, and barely upkept. There were crumbled down headstones everywhere along the side of the old broken path toward the same way. Strange, however, they seemed so small in size. You bend over, kneeling in the lightly dampened grass. You do so to look at one of the headstones. It was one that had the most writing intact. For some reason, in the moment, as you read the headstone, you did so aloud. Aloud, yet softer than that of the whispers you had been chasing. Jeremiah Benjamin Madison. May 5th, 1952, June 6th, 1968. Beloved son of Benjamin and Louise Madison. Respected and trusted brother to Nicholas Louise Madison. Taken too soon from this world, but returned to the next in that of the form of an angel. Once again returned to his one and true Father, God. As the final passage leaves your lips, you feel unnerved by it. It felt like you were there outside the church for the moment when the kid was put in the ground. Ah! You jump back, turning around screaming abruptly and short. The whisper was right next to your ear this time. Again, it said your name. Maybe it was the creepy passage, or the cemetery entirely. Either way, you felt disturbed. Like you figured out something you weren't supposed to. Like you were called there for a reason. Almost as if you were lured there. If you were, by whom? What would anyone want with you? You raise no attention and keep to yourself. Easier that way. Always has been, always will be. At this point, the cold air grows around you as if an unsafe blanket. The air, damp because of the dark, makes you feel slightly weighted down. You think it's about time you leave. Now. Rushing to your bike, you pedal on home in a hurry. The tip of your left shoe catches a chunk of ripped up road from the path. You stumble, trying to catch yourself as you fall. You reach out, but only one hand can brace you before your head smacks the pavement. Dazed, you look at your surroundings. The lights in the night seem to dance and twinkle. You blink, peering to the left as far as you could. Blinking again, you then peer to the opposite side. A shadowy figure stands there, only a couple yards from you. You blink again, and it's gone. The figure was gone, and you're sure it was a man. He must have been the one who lured you there. Shakily, you bring yourself to your feet. You place your right hand on your forehead where your connection took place as you walk towards your bike. Bending through the gate was a little harder this time. The overgrowth nicked against your scraped head the whole entire time through. It must have been only a couple seconds, but as far as it could feel, it felt like it had been hours. Either way, you were hurt and wasted no time to hop onto your bike and make way for home. Home wasn't far. The town had only stretched about a dozen blocks or so. It takes you only about 5 minutes usually to make it home from school. This time, it obviously took quite a bit longer. As you pull yourself up the driveway in front of your garage, you notice the door was open. "Damn!" you exclaimed in disappointment. "I must have forgotten to shut the garage door before I left. Another thing for Mom to yell at me and hate me for." Head still achy, you lift your non-dominant leg up and off the bike slowly. After walking it beside you into the garage, you then place it in its proper place within your own personal bike rack. Normally, this is where, even while at home, you would lock your chain around your bike. This time, you couldn't. "Oh, come on, man," you exclaim to yourself as the realization of you leaving your bike lock on the makeshift bench you had fallen asleep on sinks in. You guess if Mom wanted to be her true horrible self and take away your bike, then she might as well do so. Biking back was difficult as it was, let alone with your head being the way that it was in this moment. Trudging slowly through the house, you hear no noise. Mom must either not be home or out binge drinking again. Still, you go it slow, not just because of your mother, yet also because the room begins to spin as you walk through the kitchen doorway. You head down the hall to your room. Once there, you find almost no strength to remove your clothes. You attempt in doing so, slowly and painfully. You let out groans similar to your mother's. Difference is, however, you're hurt with a head wound, and she is just always hungover. As you go to remove your pants from the day, your underwear comes with it. Too tired to care, you submerge yourself in your bed. You lay sprawled out, ready for the dizziness to fade. But it never really did.